No, we didn't have a boat. That was a big problem. And so we decided we had to build a boat. And that was probably not a very sensible decision looking back on it, but it was a lot of fun. And I learned a lot, and we all learned a lot. But the fact that we got over here was somewhat of a miracle, I think.
There were 3.
Oh, there were 4.
4. 3 others.
We started with 4. We actually ended with 6 because we picked up 2 on the way. You know, there's a good way of hitchhiking. And I did the same thing from the West Indies coming up here. I hitchhiked with one other guy in a little boat. That's how I got from the West Indies. After I arrived in New York, I went to Canada, but I had difficulty getting into Canada because I had no papers, and they were much tougher, and I had no papers to keep me here, but they couldn't think here, though the immigration tried their hardest, they couldn't think of a way of sending me back. Normally, if you come over here on an airplane or on a boat, and you are not accepted by immigration, the boat company and the airplane company have to take you back to your original departure point. But seeing I'd come over on a self-made boat, and I had decided I was staying here, now they were faced with a real problem.
Rather than send you back, they let you go to Canada. We have a picture of you here. To earn money for school, you worked on the Defense Early Warning System inside the Arctic Circle.
I went to the Arctic 3 times, as a matter of fact, and lived in a total of 14 months up there. And it is a tremendous experience. I mean, living in the Arctic was even a greater loneliness than perhaps being at sea, because you're solely dependent on the one person, and most of the time I was with one other person. You're solely dependent on each other to stay alive. That's a very, very great learning experience, and that is, by the way, the kind of experience that I think is going to happen in the initial space colonies. It is a type of experience that has already happened in the people, particularly the Soviets, staying for long, long periods in space, 300, 325 days, with somebody else, just the 2 of you. You're very dependent. And you've got to learn to live together. And you may be quite different. I mean, certainly the person that I spent the longest with in the Arctic, he was a half Indian, but he was quite different to me in many ways. I learned a tremendous amount from him. He may have learned some things from me, maybe some of the Irishisms at least.
It's a literary theme that men travel and in traveling find themselves. Has this been your experience?
Oh, I suppose so, yes. If one puts it into a literary way, yes, you test the limits of yourself. You find your limits, and I think that that's very important. And particularly, we were talking earlier about the limits to growth. There are limits to everything, and there are limits to us. And there are certain things which we personally, as individuals, have different limits, and you need sometimes to test where they are so that you really know yourself. And then it is, you can deal with fear more easily, and in fact, perhaps Rudyard Kipling said it best, when you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those 2 imposters just the same. That's what they are, imposters, and you can treat them both the same, triumph or disaster. Maybe that's important. I think it's important in human growth. And of course, perhaps one of the most valuable things is that in these journeys that one undertakes, you always meet other people undertaking their own journeys for their own reasons. There was a rhyme I learned as a young person in Tipperary, Ireland, which I have tried to live by ever since, but which I didn't fully understand in those days, but I understand more now. And I'd like to repeat it to you. There is so much good in the worst of us, and so much bad in the best of us, that it ill behooves any of us to criticize the rest of us. And that has been something which I've tried to live by, and it's in some ways stood me in good stead, I think.
Is Western man losing the identity that makes him an explorer?
I think that there are some areas that we are losing our identity, and that we did always have in our time of great exploration. And that is the unfettered faith, the abounded faith that we controlled nature and that we were masters of our destiny, and that in fact we could fix anything by the scientific method and by our technology and by our science. Anything that we were asked to do, we could do. And I don't think that that faith is as strong anymore. And maybe some of the disasters that have occurred with our technology make it very difficult for us to really deeply believe that anymore. And that we now understand that much of what we do in the name of technological advance has in fact got another side to it, which we have paid very limited attention to, and that is that it dirties up the waters, clutters up the environment, messes up the ecological situation of the world. And we are just starting now to come back to the fact that we are dependent on the global ecology just the same as any animal that lives on Earth. And that kind of understanding has shaken us. Our problem is learning to be able to deal with it. You see, maybe in a way we have made a religion out of power. Our hegemony over all other living animals, our mastery of everything, and that we knew exactly, we made ourselves the godlike figure. And we perhaps lost a lot of our humility. Maybe now we're learning in some part again to be humble.
So the call upon Western man is still to subdue the earth?
No, I think that the call upon Western man is to learn to live within the framework of nature in the biggest sense, and to learn to be able, rather than to conquer and master nature, learn to work with it. We have, in fact, always assumed that if nature worked one way, we could work another and there was no cost involved. There is always a cost. That if we continue at the rate that we are going, we will, in fact, have burned every piece of wood, used all the resources, created all the environmental hazards and dangers of which we're warned. That has been due to our success. What we haven't learned yet is how to control that. And that's the lesson we're learning now.
Was this misplaced faith, in your opinion, responsible for some of the reactions to the Challenger loss? I remember folks likening it to the Titanic. The Titanic on the docks drew the comment, God could not sink this boat. Do you think there was that sort of misplaced faith in our space technology?
To some extent, yes. Yes, I think there was something even deeper, though. I think that, yes, it came as a terrific shock to many people in North America who didn't understand the situation as deeply as those close to the shuttle always knew that this vehicle was dangerous, and as indeed almost any vehicle going to space with rockets is dangerous. We in the United States had placed NASA we had surrounded it with an aura of infallibility, which was our problem. No human agency of any sort is infallible, and it was only a matter of time before the fallibility of NASA or any other human agency will show itself. It showed itself, however, with such impact. And you see, I sense very much that the most important thing in our space program at this time is that we develop the human side of it. We are not going into space just because of science and technology. We are going into space because we're human beings. We are blessed in this generation. It is absolutely, we are the only generation in the whole history of humanity, everybody who is alive today, who has actually been at the birth of humankind's move away from the cradle and out into the universe. And we forever now will be exploring the universe, and yet only one series of human beings, us, were there at the beginning. And nobody can ever take that away from us. But at the same time, the responsibility of being here at the birth means that we have got to bend every effort to ensure that what has started now will continue. And we must keep open the doors for future generations, and particularly our own children, to be able to make their decisions and to be able to move onward and move outward.